Thank you, Kalia. And hi, everybody. Uh, we're going to talk about starting vegetables from seed rather than, or maybe as well as buying them as little starts. Um, there are lots of interesting things you can do from seed that you're limited a little bit from if you only buy starts. And we uh, we can, for instance, have a lot more variety by starting from seed. Um, we're limited to what the wholesale growers will grow for us at the nurseries in terms of what we can sell on to you as customers. Whereas there are thousands of varieties of vegetables available from seed that can be worth trying, and plus there are regional, local or more local growers who can grow varieties of vegetables that maybe work particularly well in our area. Um, we also can, by growing from seed, we can avoid having to buy over and over and over again the quick crops such as arugula. Arugula goes to seed after about 30 days. And so, if you want to stay in arugula and have to buy several cell packs of arugula every month to do that, you not only have to go to the nursery a lot, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you also spend a lot of money on it where you could easily grow them from seed. And I always have encouraged people to do that with the quick crops. Root crops are of advantage from seed because you don't have to transplant them necessarily. The risk in buying carrots in a six pack is that when you go to transplant them, they either break or they've already curled up inside the six pack and won't make a nice straight long carrot. And so, by sowing them directly in pots or in the ground from seed, you can grow nice carrots and radishes and things like that that you don't want to risk breaking. And also, you can plan and plant at your convenience rather than at the convenience of the wholesale grower's schedule, which is then translated through us, the retailer, to you. We can only buy what the wholesaler has available to us at a given time. And if that doesn't match your timing because you're going off on vacation for 3 weeks or something like that, and by the time you get back, we're out of the plant that you wanted, you can probably grow it yourself very easily and do it at your own convenience and based on your own microclimates, which vary radically around the Bay Area. Um, there are a few things you need for germinating seeds. The obvious seeds, something to grow them in, some little pots, some water. Uh, the idea of growing from seed is partly to get a head start. So if you're going to do it while it's still cold outside, you want a nice indoor spot with some sunlight. Or you can easily get these days get a very efficient grow light, maybe with a little metal uh, reflector around it. They don't take very much electricity and they do an excellent job. They're just LED lights like everything else we get these days and very easy to use. And then an optional idea is to get a little heat mat that will provide some bottom heat for the seeds. It warms up the soil a few degrees, and as you'll see as we go along here, can really speed up the process. Um, when talking about seeds, I like to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page with what seeds are about. So I like to go through this little what I call the mini botany lesson. But um, seeds contain everything that's needed for the plant to grow. So part of that is the little plant embryo, the baby plant, which obviously in a small seed is microscopic. In a larger seed, like a bean, if you pry the two halves of the bean seed apart, you can actually see the little embryonic plant between the two halves of the seed. Um, we have to provide some moisture. Seeds, after all, will stay dormant for years and years if they don't have any moisture. They're smart enough to know that they shouldn't sprout if there's no moisture to support them. And so you have to give them that trigger. Something in their DNA tells them that when they get moist and the temperature's right, they have to start growing. And then we have to provide them with light because after they've used up the food that's stored in the seed, they have to start making their own food, and they do that by changing light into energy. Uh, and that is the basis of course, of the whole food web, is that the plants provide proteins and sugars and carbohydrates that they manufacture from light and chemicals, and then little things eat them, and bigger things eat them, and eventually we're eating either concentrated plant material or we're eating animal material that came from the plants. The root that comes out of the seed is called a radical for some reason, and the starter leaves are called cotyledons or seed leaves, and usually the root takes off first and gets a purchase in the ground, and then up come the leaves, and the plant is ready to start manufacturing. Um, a simple way of starting seeds, there's going to be pictures here of an example using beans, is to just use a moist paper towel. Put the seeds between two layers of moist paper towel. Put them in a Ziploc bag and close it up, leaving maybe an inch of the zip open for a little air circulation, and put it in a slightly warmer than room temperature spot. I like the top of my refrigerator for that. It's a couple of degrees warmer than the rest of the room, and seems to be a great place for sprouting seeds. And the example here is going to be a bean because it's a great big seed and we can see what's going on, but this works with smaller seeds as well. Anything down to about the size of a tomato or pepper seed, which is, like a couple of millimeters in size. Um, Smaller than that, and you have a problem because the roots start growing into the paper towel. And then when you try to separate the little growing plant from the paper towel, you break the roots. So I don't like to use this method for tiny seeds, but for anything slightly moderate size to larger seeds, beans, squash, cucumbers, that sort of thing, it works great. So here's an example of some scarlet runner beans. Uh, this is a perennial type of bean that you might look for. It makes a big fleshy root that overwinters and then it'll grow up the next year again. It's a different species than your average string bean, but very nutritious, and you can eat them green or you can cook them up after they're dried like these, and they're very pretty. So these beans are sitting on a moist paper towel, and then the moist paper towel is folded over. And then it's put in a plastic bag and carefully labeled and dated. as you can see, so that you know what you're growing and when you started it. Um, and then lo and behold, very soon, the radical starts growing out. That's the root. And it grows longer and starts to branch out. And pretty soon you've got wild roots all over the place, and you've got the start of the sprouts coming out. Now, in beans, and a little different than a lot of seeds, because the cotyledons are actually the big beany looking things that you see, and the roots and the sprout come up out of the cotyledons, and these are going to be true leaves here, not cotyledon leaves, the first leaves that come out in the bean plant. It's partly why they sprout so strongly. They have so much stored up energy in that big old cotyledon that they can grow very, very strongly from the get-go. And here they are, lengthening out, and still we haven't given them anything but a little water in the paper towel. And now they're looking for some light so that they can start photosynthesizing and making food for themselves. And of course, we are torturing them here a little bit, keeping them in the paper towel. And here they are making their big old leaves and ready to grow and make beans. So you can see that everything needed to get going is right there in the seed. And that's true for tiny little seeds as well. It's just that they can't go for as long because they don't have as much energy stored up as a bean does. The beans are sort of the kings of energy storage, and that's why uh, they have a lot of protein in them and a lot of carbohydrates, and that's why they're a good source of protein for us to eat as well. Uh,
And real quick before you move on, I have a quick question for you in terms
yeah.
of about how long would you say that process took?
All right. That whole process took about a week to maybe 8 or 9 days. Um, and I don't know exactly. I should have looked at all the pictures and I could have told you exactly, but that the meta information isn't available here on the Zoom version of this, so I can't tell you exactly, but about a week. And if um, as we'll see here, if we use bottom heat, it would be even quicker. So
Mhm.
with beans, it doesn't take long, and they don't need real warm temperatures. And once they get growing, they just grow like gangbusters, as long as you give them some light and some water. So that's the paper towel method, and it's really useful and really easy. But you kind of have to do one kind of seed in the paper towel, and then if you want to do another one, you do a different seed in the paper towel, a different paper towel, and because they're going to sprout at slightly different times, and you don't want them getting all mixed up, so you don't know what's what. Um, so a more organized, in a sense, way to do it if you want to do more quantity or more variety at the same time is to use some kind of cell pack system. This is a one that you can buy, um, and it has 8, 9 cell packs, so 72 cells that you can put seeds in. They look like this. So they're like a six pack, except they're a 9 pack, and they're a little deeper than a six pack. Um, and they come with a tray which does not have holes in it, which is kind of nice if you're doing this indoors. If you just take the tray that's under the six packs that come from the nursery, it has drainage holes in it, so it'll leak all over the place on you. So you'd have to find something else to put the six packs in, like a baking pan or something like that would work fine. But this kit comes with the tray, and also with a little plastic cover, like a greenhouse cover, which is nice for keeping the humidity in while they're getting ready to sprout. Um, and then we need a medium to put in the packs, and I like this seed starter mix from E.B. Stone, which you can find at your local sloat store. Um, it's a mixture of peat moss and perlite, about 50% each by volume, not by weight, because perlite is extremely light. Um, you can also use coconut coir instead of peat moss. That's available in a little bale, and you just soak it and tear it apart, and then can mix perlite with it if you want to make your own mix. Um, the reason you use a seed starting mix and not just regular potting soil is that you want a relatively sterile mix, believe it or not, for starting the seeds. And peat moss and perlite is relatively sterile and a little bit acidic, and that suppresses fungi and bacteria that can attack the little baby plants when they sprout. And you can get a phenomenon known as damping off, which is when your sprouts come up and then they just all suddenly die because they've been attacked by fungi and bacteria, and you lose a crop. It can happen even with the cleanest conditions because fungi and bacteria are everywhere, and if they get started, it happens they get started right when you are planting your seeds, then you may lose a crop, but it's not something that happens over and over again usually. So this seed starter mix, you just put in the cells. There they are, filled up with the seed starting mix. And I like to label things. I hate it when I do something and then I can't figure out what the heck I planted. I've lost the seed packet or whatever, or I just can't associate the plant with the seed packet. And even though I recognize a lot of sprouts, because I've had experience with them, I don't recognize all of them all the time. And I just don't like it when I don't know what I'm growing. So I use labels. And there's lots of kinds, plastic, wood. A clothespin works well. Um, and so I picked out six different seed packets, bok choy and arugula, a cucumber, some lettuce, a tomato, and a pepper, and decided I would sow those in six of the eight cells. And then we had these not gourds, I guess. They're really squash or mini pumpkins left over after Thanksgiving. And so I broke one of these open. This one's called a warty minion, and decided to harvest the seeds out of it and sow those as well. And another one called a mini heirloom pumpkin. Pumpkins are just squash, after all. And these are the seeds up close of the minion. So you just take them out the way you would if you're cleaning out a pumpkin to make a jack-o'-lantern, and wash them off, dry them, and uh, and then they're ready to sow. In this case, I put three in each cell, and I did one of the cell packs with the warty minion and one with the um, heirloom, the mini heirloom. And so I just pressed those seeds down into the soil a little bit and then covered them very thinly with more soil and watered them in. And then I put a little pinch of each of the other seeds that we saw in the seed packets in each cell, maybe three or four seeds in each little cell, and covered them and watered them and labeled them. And then this is with the little plastic roof on it so that the humidity stays in, and you only have to water it once that way. And then I got fancy and decided to use one of these heat pads. Um, they're not very expensive, and they fit one of these cell trays perfectly. They raise the temperature on the bottom about 3 or 4 degrees. That's all, and they use something like 17 watts, so like a little light bulb. Um, and here it is sitting on the heat pad. You can barely see it, but it's sticking out. The corner of it's sticking out right here. And away we go. And then a weekend happened, which is 3 days for me. And boom, 3 days later, um, we've got arugula, we've got bok choy back here, and we've got some cucumbers coming up here. So with the bottom heat, it didn't take long, and it means you got to get to work because once they start growing, they're really growing, and you're not going to grow them forever in these little cell packs. This is the arugula up close, and you can see it has kind of a typical brassica or cabbage family leaf as it starts out. These are the seed leaves or cotyledon leaves, and they're always this kind of interesting shape with a little notch in them right here, maybe heart shaped slightly, and that's typical of all brassicas, of which arugula is one. And that same day, this is day 3, you can see the roots of the arugula have penetrated all the way to the bottom of the plug, and these are quite deep. These are deeper than your just little tiny cell packs. These are more like what we call a pony pack. Um, so this all happened very, very quickly. Now we're going to we're going to come back to these plants and see what happened to them. But we're going to turn to a third idea here for starting seeds. And by the way, there are lots of other methodologies, and um, uh, none of them are right or wrong. It's just you have to find a way of growing things that works for you and where you kind of learn the characteristics of what you're growing and a routine that helps you to move them from maybe one size to the other until you get them into their final growing spot. So that's a matter of where, what kind of light do I have? What kind of temperature do I have? What kind of space do I have? And what makes sense for me to grow um, as opposed to somebody else growing something else. But this is a little tray. It's sold for sprouting microgreens, and it has a little coir mat which goes with it, or yeah, they're sold separately, but it fits it perfectly. And you can sow the seeds right on the coir mat and grow them right there. And then after you've harvested and maybe grown a couple of crops on the mat and it's kind of full of roots, then you can just throw it in your compost. And so you're not using a plastic mat or something like that. Um, but you can also use regular soil, either the seed starting mix or regular potting soil. So this is showing the mat inside it, and um, this is a packet of microgreens. So for $6, you get a lot of seeds that you can grow a lot of microgreens with. Um, this is what the seeds look like. They're not all that tiny. These are a mixture of different brassicas, so they're like broccoli and collards and kale and that sort of thing, which all have good flavor as little tiny sprouts. Um, and here's one that has regular potting soil in it. So let's see. I can't quite read the date on it. I think it's 12/27. December 27th is when these got planted up, and not using bottom heat with these. Here's the float organic potting soil. Now, this is frankly, it's a little rich for seed starting. And by that I mean it has a lot of different organic elements in it, earthworm castings and feather meal and bat guano and kelp meal, all kinds of good stuff for plants to grow in. A little rich for seed starting just because the fungi and bacteria like all those things as well. And so you could have a damping off problem using this, but I decided to use it anyway for the microgreens and just see what happened. Um, these are a couple of the fertilizers that I like to use. And just, I don't use it in the seed starting mixture as such, but at the next step, when I move the seeds into something a little bigger, I like to add a little bit of fertilizer, even to the slope organic potting soil, because it's a little more, these are both organic fertilizers, but they're a little more quickly usable than the fertilizer elements that are already in the potting soil. More the elements in the potting soil, like the feather meal and the bat guano, have to be broken down by biological action even more than the stuff, kind of the similar stuff. This is just it's ground very finely, so it can start to become available more quickly. And I like to add a little bit of that to the potting soil. This is another nice one. This is a company called Down to Earth. And they have a nice, this BioLive is a nice fertilizer, pretty similar to the EB Stone fertilizers. Um, and although it says compost this box, I was disappointed to find that they have a plastic liner inside the box. So the box composts, but the liner doesn't. Uh, that's life in the big city, I guess. Um, Now, in terms of what I might want to go to as my next step up from the cell pack, I have to think about, okay, I need to put these little growing plants into something to keep them going. And I like these cocoa pots. This is coconut coir. Peat pots are also available, and it may be that you can find some cow poop pots. They're marketed as cow pots, and they're made of cow poop, sterilized and all that. But it seems like a good use for the cow poop. Um, the cocoa pots are nice, or all of those types of pots are nice because the roots of the plants can grow right through the pot. You don't have to knock the plants out of the pot in order to plant them up into the next wherever they're going to go. So that to me is a nice thing. And then the cocoa pot just deteriorates in the soil and adds organic matter to the soil. So I like them a lot. These are the 4-inch size, 4-inch diameter at the top. Um, and sometimes there are 2-inch peat pots available. I think those are a little small. You're just going to have to move up from them very quickly. So I think the 4-inch is a good size to go to. Um, so in this picture, I've knocked and that literally knocked is the word, some of the arugula out of the cell packs to get them ready to plant into the 4-inch pots. And when I say knock them out, you just have to turn the cell pack over and tap it a little bit and ease the arugula out. And you can see it stays together pretty well. The roots are holding the soil together even at this small size. And if it falls apart a little bit, it's okay. The little plants are tougher than they look. And you can actually tease them apart individually. I'll show you a picture of some bok choy that's done that way. So you don't have to worry about them all that much. And you put a little soil in the 4-inch pot and then put the bunch of arugula in and then fill it back up the rest of the way with soil with a little fertilizer added. And let's see where we are here. Gotta find myself. And there we are with arugula in 4-inch pots ready to grow up and probably can grow them all the way from here without having to separate them any further. Um, there's no need to grow arugula as individual plants. They can grow as groups. So these will be ready to put in a big pot or in the ground uh, in a couple of weeks. And arugula likes cool weather, so it's not a problem doing it this time of year, but probably more successful than trying to sow them right out in the ground where it's really cold and the rain might batter them and the birds will eat them, and you'll have trouble telling them from the weeds that sprout up. So uh, doing it like this will give you more concentrated success, and you can just go out and stick them in a big pot or in the ground once they get a little bigger than this. Um, Now here's the cucumber after 5 days, and you can see the cotyledon leaves are opening up. And cucumbers are quite vigorous growers. They're a vine, and if this is a long Japanese cucumber, uh, and one of my favorites. This is not the time to start cucumbers. This is just for demonstration. Um, it's too cold to grow cucumbers around here until about realistically end of April, early May. Um, they might be available to you before that, but you have to really baby them because they really don't like the cold spring weather that we sometimes have. But as a demonstration, you can see they're very easy to sprout and they grow quite quickly. And you could move these into the 4-inch pots and then directly into the garden bed or into a grow box or however it is that you grow them and have good success. And cucumbers are one of those things where it's hard to find the variety that you like. If you like these Japanese cucumbers, they're hardly ever available in the nursery, and if they are, it's sporadic. Same with the like the Armenian cucumbers are hard to find sometimes. So if you like the regular old straight eight type cucumber, those are usually available. But the Persians are sometimes hard to find, but they're real easy to grow from seed, so go for it. Now here are the little tiny plant. These are the bok choy plants. Um, and again, these are only a few days old, but you can see they've developed good roots, and I've teased them out on the left there into little individual plants. And you can pick them right up. They don't break. You can pick them up and transplant them into something else, and they'll be happy as clams. These are square coir pot that comes in an 8-pack, and I've just snipped them apart with the scissors to make individual pots. The 8-packs are fine, but it's a little hard to since it makes a big old rectangular 8-pack. It's easier to cut them apart and put them in a circle like this. They don't take up as much room. And it's easier to find something to put them in, like a round saucer, rather than to having to find something rectangular to put the 8-pack in. So I like to do it that way. But yeah, I mean, you can just see that the little plants have everything they need here. They're ready. They've got chlorophyll in the green leaves, ready to make food. The roots are as long as the stems are, or longer. and they're just going to town. Um, Now here are warty minions, the squash. Um, this is in the 9 pack on the right, and I've lifted them out of the 9 pack and put them in a 6 pack here. So I have one in each of the 6 packs, so they can grow a little bit. And I managed to label it such that we can actually read it. That's nice. Um, Squash, again, is a very strong grower, but it needs warm weather. So we're too early now to do squash. So this is just a demonstration. Um, but it's really good to get it started inside if you want a kind of an early start on the squash. If you're going to wait and plant them in the ground, you want to wait till the ground warms up a bit. And so really you should wait until at least May before you try to grow them from seed in the ground. They may sprout earlier than that, but they're not going to grow very fast. And when they don't grow fast, then they're subject to attack from mildew and other funguses, and also from insects and birds. And so I like to wait until it's warmer and they can grow really fast, and then they outgrow most of their problems. Um, and Squash is one of the things that's available at the nurseries in plant form, um, but not for very long usually. Um, if you have varieties that you like to grow Cocozelle zucchini, well, you want to find Cocozelle zucchini, but you can't always find that at the nursery when you want it. So if you know how to grow it from seed, it's super easy, and you can grow the varieties of squash that you want. So I encourage that. Now we're back to the sprouts, and here we are. We're 7 days in for the microgreens, and you can see them starting to come up. There's still lots of brown seeds sprinkled on here. By the way, I did not cover these seeds. I just sprinkled them on and kind of patted them down a little bit so that make sure they made contact with the soil. I didn't want to try to bury them. Um, and so these are starting to grow, and we'll see them as we go along that they're going to make some great microgreens. And um, it's today is the 24th. I think the last picture I took was yesterday, so you'll see they're going to be ready to go. Um, these are now the tomatoes and the peppers. The tomatoes, a variety called Moskvich. It's a very early tomato that uh, has probably Siberian roots, uh, and is a good one to start early. This is a little too early, although I think probably I can cuddle these along until they're ready to go. But it's more work than is necessary if you start this early. I would say start the end of February if you want to grow some tomatoes from seed, and that's about going to be perfect timing. You can get a lot more information about timing, by the way, with a book that I mention in the outline, Mel Bartholomew's Square Foot Gardening. Um, it's called square foot gardening because he likes to measure things off in 1 square foot sections and then figure out how many plants he can put in there. And it helped me visualize kind of how I could uh, pack the most stuff into an area. Um, we tend to think of gardens as being long rows because um, farmers with plows want to grow things in long rows because it's more efficient for them. But it's really more efficient in a home garden to grow things in blocks rather than in long rows. And square foot gardening helps you to visualize those blocks. But he also has some real good information about seed starting and timing of seed starting. So I encourage you to look at that book. The other reference that I put in there is Pam Pierce's book, Golden Gate Gardening, which is really I would say, the Bible or Encyclopedia Britannica in the old days, the Wikipedia of Bay Area vegetable gardening. It's full of wonderful, experienced advice, some great recipes, and talks about different microclimates. She was in San Francisco at the time that she wrote the book. Um, but the newer edition has been expanded to include more about East Bay microclimates and South Bay microclimates. So I would encourage you to find the latest edition, which is called the 30th anniversary edition. Get the reflections off there. Golden Gate Gardening. Um, So tomatoes and peppers. The pepper here is the Jimmy Nardello, which is my favorite Italian frying tomato. I think it's the tastiest of them all. It's a sweet pepper, and I try to grow it every year. Um, Now, here's January 10th, 14 days in. The microgreens are growing like crazy. And here is a cherry tomato. This is an example of what you can do when you grow your own seeds. This was a cherry tomato growing at the nursery that popped up in a six-pack of lettuce. So it was an unlabeled tomato that popped up in the lettuce. So I pulled it out of the lettuce and grew it in a pot, and it grew very nicely and made lots of good tasting cherry tomatoes. And by the middle of December, it was still going strong and had not succumbed to disease and was still making fruit. And so I thought, wow, that's kind of a nice one. I don't know what it is, but I think I'll save some seeds from it and grow it and see if they come out with the same plant. If it's a hybrid, it won't come out to be the same tomato. So since I don't know what it is, it could be a hybrid tomato. Um, but if it's not, and it breeds true, then I might have an interesting little tomato there. I still won't know the name of it, so I'll have to, make it slote number 10 or something like that. Um, but anyway, I sowed this on January something, I can't read it, 3rd, January 3rd. And it says right there on the text, doesn't it? Um, so I'm hoping that I have a hardy, disease-resistant tomato here, and we'll grow it up and see what happens. But if in the old days, um, each of our neighborhoods would have probably a tomato that everybody liked, and we'd all share seeds from it. Or if we were in Italy, every little village would have its own pepper that was the favorite, and everybody kind of traded seeds on the ones that were doing the best, and you end up with what's called a land race that way, which is a very localized subspecies of a given plant. And so if this works, this is going to be the start of my land race of cherry tomatoes, and we'll see what we end up with. But you can only do that if you start them yourself, because you're not going to be able to buy them in the store. And here on January 23rd, 30 days in, are the Jimmy Nardello peppers on the left and the Moskvich tomatoes on the right. And you can see the tomatoes are now making real tomato-shaped leaves. And the peppers are starting to put out some real leaves right in the middle there, those tiny little ones, in addition to the cotyledon leaves. And they're doing very well. They're under a combination of natural light through windows and skylights, and a couple of grow lights. So they're growing quite compactly, which is nice. One of the problems with growing seeds indoors at home without enough light is that they lengthen out. It's called etiolation, and they're searching for the light and they get skinny and long and maybe won't even stand up on their own. And so you have to provide enough light that they can grow stockily enough to be worthwhile. So that's a little bit of a challenge that has to be overcome. And here finally are the microgreens ready to harvest as of yesterday. Um, I didn't do it, but when I get back, these are growing at the nursery, and when I get back there, well, which is today, this afternoon, um, I'll take some cheese and some bread with me, and I'll harvest some microgreens and put them on my cheese sandwich, and wish you all salud. Um, and just for comparison, um, here is a commercially grown flat of arugula for sale at your local nursery. Um, it looks pretty similar. Um, but it'll cost you $7 a cell pack. Um, and we love to sell them to you. And I don't want to discourage you from buying them, but it sure is easy to grow them from seed. And so I encourage you to do that as well. Um, if you're an arugula fan like I am, the only way to keep yourself in arugula all the time is to sow a little bit about every 10 days and just keep it coming, keep it coming, keep it coming. Now, this time of year, you can sow lettuce and kale and chard and bok choy, even outside, and it'll sprout. Um, and if you want to grow your beans and squash and cucumbers, the bigger seeded items, right in the ground, you'll just have to wait. It's a great thing to do, and it's not too late even to do it in June. We have such a long growing season here that you can have plenty of produce growing things in June. I know a guy who grows tomatoes in the Petaluma area, and he does not put a single tomato in the ground until June. And that's just because it's warm enough then for the tomatoes to really grow. And so even though they're available to us here in most of the Bay Area from the growers as early as, oh, the beginning of March, um, it's very difficult to get them to grow in the ground that early. Um, so I'll give my pitch here, which I also give during the talk on tomatoes. But by then, everybody has their tomatoes already, so it's kind of late. So I'm going to tell you now, if you get tomatoes in March, put them in a 1 gallon or 2 gallon size black plastic grower can and grow it in that, hopefully with a southern exposure somewhere, and hopefully with a like a house wall or a adobe wall behind them for some reflected heat, and they'll do much better than they do in the ground because their roots can warm up each day if they're in the container out in the air and with the sun shining on it. If they're in the ground, the soil is going to be down or probably under 50 degrees, and it's not going to warm up a few inches down. And they're just going to sit there and be miserable in the ground. But they'll be very happy growing in the container for about a month. And then you put them in the ground, and the ground's warmer by then, and away you go. So that's a pitch on things like tomatoes and peppers that like warmer ground. So we went over a paper towel method, which I recommend you to try. And by the way, it's really fun for the kids to see it happen in the paper towel method because you can see all parts of the plant. Uh, we talked about doing it in the cell pack kind of environment, either with or without bottom heat. We talked about sowing microgreens, just kind of sheet sowing and let them all grow up, and then you're going to cut them off with scissors to harvest them. And then sowing in the ground, which is a little uh, later in the season, and uh, I recommend it for root crops, either in the ground. When I say ground, I could also be saying large containers. As far as the plant's concerned, they can't tell the difference between the ground and a large container.
Mhm.
And a lot of us, for various reasons, prefer containers, either because that's where we can put things where there's sunlight, or in my case, I can keep the deer out from a patio area and grow things there. I can keep my dog from destroying the plants in the ground, digging everything up. Um, so I like to grow lots of things in containers. Um, but sowing root crops directly in the ground or in the containers is a good idea. Sowing large seeds directly in the ground is a fine idea later on in the season. And when you sow little plants outdoors, especially in about the March timeframe, you have to keep your eye out for the white-crowned sparrows, which migrate through on their way north at that point. And they are salad lovers. They'll come through the nursery tables and just devour practically every little green sprout that is on the nursery table. So sometimes we have to cover all the vegetables with bird netting to keep them off. So keep that in mind when you uh, sow things in the ground. Um, they only like them when they're really tiny and tender. And you can tell that birds are doing the damage to your little plants because you'll have these perfect little pie slices cut out of the leaves, little triangular pieces, the shape of their beak, uh, which are razor sharp, and they'll just bite off a little triangle and disappear, and there you are with leaves that are all cut up by the passing birds. So keep your eye out for that. I love birds, but I don't want them eating all of my salad.
Mhm.
Um,
All right, Dan. So it sounds like we're kind of coming to the end of your presentation. There are a couple questions sitting in the Q&A, but before we get to those, there was one or two things that I wanted to personally touch on just to help people with understanding.
sure.
Um, for the larger seeds, a lot of the times I find that they need to be buried a little bit deeper than for the smaller seeds because the smaller seeds need that light germination. Therefore, for like the growing mat situation, it's usually best to do that just with things that have the smaller seeds. Would you agree with that?
Yes, the growing mat is really designed very specifically for growing microgreens and harvesting them off the mat. And I wouldn't recommend the mat for sprouting seeds that you're going to try to transplant.
Mhm.
The reason being that the roots go into the mat and are very hard to get out of the mat. But In general, yes. The smaller the seed is, the less you're going to bury it. And many of the small seeds need some access to light to get the trigger to sprout. And so I mentioned, I think, when I said I sprinkled the seeds on the potting soil, the microgreen seeds, and I didn't cover them. I just patted them down to make sure that they're making good contact with the soil. And that's all that's necessary. And you'll get better germination from those little brassica seeds if you don't cover them. The exception would be, in my mind, if you're sowing them outdoors, I would very thinly cover them because the birds are going to love to just eat them directly right out of the garden. And you can lose a lot of seeds that way. So just barely covering them with a little fine compost or something like that, and patting that down would make sense. The big seeds, my rule of thumb is to plant them about 2 times their diameter in terms of depth. If I'm planting them outside. If I'm planting them for a six-pack growing situation, I don't bury them deeply in the six-pack. I just barely cover them, and they'll sprout fine. So yes, and it's kind of like bulbs. The bigger the bulb is, the deeper it goes. The bigger the seed is, the deeper it goes.
Yeah. Okay. And then the one other thing that I always get questions on at the store is people trying to start their seeds inside and they start to mold. And one of the things I'm regularly reminding people of is that humidity is great, but you do need some airflow as well.
Yeah. Um, you saw how quickly they germinated with the bottom heat, and um, that avoids the mold problem. Um, if they're going to be in a cooler environment where it might take a week or even 10 days for them to sprout, then my preference is not to cover them. But then I have to remember to mist them or somehow keep them moist. I've had the problem of, for instance, putting them on one of the coir mats to grow and then forgetting to look at them, and the mat dries out and the seeds either have started to sprout, but they die because they dry out, or they don't sprout because they're not moist enough. So yeah, you have to pay attention to them. But even the microgreens, if we had put them on the bottom heat, they would have sprouted very quickly as well. They would have been 3 days, they'd have been going like crazy, and we could have had a crop of microgreens in probably a week to 10 days, no problem, instead of closer to 30 days. So temperature makes a big difference for how fast they grow and for how fast they sprout.
Mhm. Okay, so before we wrap up, let's look at a couple of the questions sitting in the Q&A. I've got two different questions on peppers specifically. One of
Mhm.
them asking about recommendations growing sweet peppers in the Marin area. And then the other one asking for advice on growing some of the hotter peppers in the San Francisco area on the patio specifically that they mentioned.
Yeah. Peppers, kind of like tomatoes, um, have different growing speeds, ripening speeds. So you can say that there are earlier peppers and later peppers. In the Bay Area, in general, we're going to have better luck with earlier peppers. Um, for sweet peppers, my own preference, I think they taste better and are more prolific. I like to grow what are the group of peppers are called cubanos. Um, and they include all of the Italian frying peppers, which would include gianardello, giant red Marconi, the Italian bullhorn. Um, there are several others. All of these grow very well and relatively quickly and will give you lots of really good sweet peppers. Bell peppers are much more difficult in our climate. Our nights are cold, regardless of where we are in the Bay Area. Even if we have an 80-degree day, we still have probably a 55-degree night. And big bell peppers need warm nights to ripen well and be prolific. And so, although you can grow them, you're not going to get a mass of peppers. They're not going to grow the way they do in the Central Valley of California. That's just a fact of life. So I say stick with if you buy bell peppers, get early bell peppers like King of the North is a really good bell pepper. Um, and things like YOLO Wonder are longer season peppers that aren't going to be as prolific as an early pepper like King of the North. Hot peppers tend to be um, longer season peppers. Depends on what you want to grow. Um, Jalapenos are easy, especially you can get early what are called early jalapenos, and they're a relatively faster, earlier ripening pepper than some of the other jalapenos. Serranos do very well for me, and they're much hotter than I like to eat. Um, if you want to grow really hot peppers, like real fire breathers, um, um, they're all long season peppers, and San Francisco is going to be difficult. Um, Not so much because of the daytime temperature, but because of the nighttime temperature. I think San Francisco has the coldest nighttime temperatures in the Bay Area, and it's just a tough one to deal with. So look for any variety of pepper that may say it's early, and early means something like not more than about 70 days from putting a transplant out to ripening. That's uh, days to ripening. It means from when you put a 6-week transplant out into the garden with ideal conditions, it takes 70 days to ripen. Some of the really hot peppers take 120 days even. And in our weather, that's even longer. So usually we don't get those peppers ripening until close to September. And although they will ripen, they can be very challenging.
I
So,
will say that that does not hold true over here in the East Bay. You can get your hot peppers much earlier in the year in the East Bay. We get our long dry spells and we do have cold nighttime temps, but not quite as bad. So if you're over here in the Pleasant Hill, Concord area, swing on by for some ghost peppers.
there you go. Ghost it up. Well, I have had good luck with some of the jalapenos, not jalapenos, the habaneros in Mill Valley even, which is relatively cool. If you happen to have, a hot deck, south-facing deck, that'll be helpful. I have a spot at my home where it's too hot for tomatoes on the deck, but it's perfect for peppers. So they like more heat. And if you were to want to grow eggplant, for instance, you would want the hottest spot that you can possibly find. Eggplant is a difficult one around here also. You can do it, but you need a hot spot to do it. But yeah, I encourage everybody to find a pepper that you really like and grow it, and encourage your friends to grow it. They're not grown enough, and I use the Jimmy Nardellos for everything from eggs in the morning to my sort of basic onion, pepper, mushroom melange that I put on everything from hamburgers to chicken to tofu and just rice and beans. I love the combination of peppers, onions, and mushrooms together, sweet peppers especially. Uh,
Definitely. Alrighty, so if anybody has any further questions, please do give the calls a store. We're always happy to answer questions about seed starting, especially veggies, and what works best for your specific area.